Have you ever had something you relied on suddenly fall away? And instead of feeling free, you felt like the floor disappeared beneath your feet? And have you ever noticed that the moments that look like bad luck on the outside sometimes become the exact moments that wake your soul up on the inside? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are walking into a story inspired by a theme that shows up in astrology and also shows up in real human life, even for people who never read a chart. Lost, isolation, and spiritual awakening. The first idea is this: when life removes what you cling to, it is not always punishment. Sometimes it is a ruthless kind of mercy that forces you to meet yourself without distractions. The second idea is this: karma is not only what happens to you. Karma is what you keep practicing when the world shakes. If you practice bitterness, bitterness becomes your home. If you practice awareness, wisdom, compassion, and steady discipline, even a harsh season can become the beginning of a new destiny. Let me tell you a story about a man named Arin. Arin did not think of himself as spiritual. He thought of himself as practical. He liked plans, numbers, clear goals. He liked knowing what would happen next, or at least believing he could predict it. He was not arrogant, just cautious. Caution had protected him before. Caution had kept him from being embarrassed, from being blindsided, from being the person who got laughed at for hoping too much. Arin had built a life that looked stable, a job that paid on time, friends he saw on weekends, a relationship that seemed calm. Even his habits were stable. He woke up at the same hour, ate at the same places, took the same route to work. He called it routine. But routine can also be a quiet form of control. It can be the mind saying, if I keep everything consistent, nothing can hurt me. Then a season arrived that did not ask for his permission. It started with something small. A strange tension at work, the kind where meetings feel colder than usual. People stop including you in little decisions. Your name gets left off a thread. You are told not to worry while you can feel worry living in the walls. Arin tried to be mature about it. He told himself it was temporary. He worked harder. He stayed later. He volunteered for extra tasks. He smiled more. He tried to become too useful to remove. That is an old strategy many people carry. If I become indispensable, I will be safe. But life does not always reward that strategy. Sometimes life exposes it. A month later, the company restructured. The manager called Arin into a room and spoke in a calm voice that sounded rehearsed. The role is being eliminated. It is not personal. Here is the severance package. Thank you for your contribution. Arin heard the words as if they were coming from underwater. His ears rang. His throat went dry. His mind tried to argue with reality. This cannot be happening. I did everything right. I was loyal. I was consistent. I was careful. He walked out of the building holding a box of desk items that suddenly looked ridiculous. A mug, a notebook, a few small objects. They felt like proof of a life that had been real yesterday and uncertain today. The first night after the job loss, Arin could not sleep. His body was tired, but his mind was frantic. It ran numbers. How long can I survive? What will people think? What does this say about me? What if I never recover? What if this is the beginning of a downward slide? This is how loss becomes more than loss. The event is one thing. The story the mind builds around it becomes a second disaster. Arin began applying for jobs immediately. He refreshed listings like a ritual. He sent messages to contacts he had not spoken to in years. He tried to stay busy because business felt like power. But underneath the activity, a deeper feeling was growing. Shame. Not shame because he had done something wrong, but shame because he could no longer identify as the stable one. He could no longer use his job as proof that he belonged in the adult world. Then the relationship began to wobble. His partner did not leave dramatically. There was no screaming. There was just distance. The kind of distance that grows when one person is anxious and the other person does not know how to hold it. Arin tried to explain his fear. But he did it with a tight voice and constant urgency. He needed reassurance every day. He needed confirmation that he was still loved. He needed to feel chosen because the job loss had made him feel discarded. His partner tried it first, then got tired, then began saying they needed space. Space is a neutral word that can feel like a knife when you are already afraid. One evening, after another tense conversation, his partner said something honest. "I care about you, but you are not here. You are always in your panic. I feel like I am dating your fear." That sentence landed hard. Arin wanted to defend himself. He wanted to say, "Of course I am afraid. Anyone would be." But he also knew it was true. It had become a storm that followed him everywhere. A week later, his partner left. Not with cruelty, with sadness, with the quiet exhaustion of someone who could not keep standing inside someone else's nervous system. So now Arin had lost two anchors at once: work and love, structure and intimacy. This is the kind of moment people call bad luck. But in many spiritual traditions, this is the moment that forces truth. Because when the anchors disappear, the mind has nowhere to hide. It cannot bargain with routine. It cannot distract with social plans. It cannot borrow identity from a title. It cannot borrow worth from being wanted. It must face the question that most people avoid. Who am I without what I cling to? Arin did not ask that question yet. At first he did what many people do. He tried to replace quickly. He applied harder. He tried to date casually to prove he was still attractive. He posted on social media in a way that made him look busy and unbothered. But the body knows when you are performing. His appetite changed. His stomach felt tight. His sleep became shallow. He woke up with his heart racing. Some mornings he felt like he could not breathe deeply. He went for walks just to settle the buzzing in his hands. One day he met an older neighbor in the elevator. The neighbor was a quiet man named Dev. Dev had the kind of calm that did not look like confidence. It looked like acceptance. Dev asked how Arin was doing. Arin almost lied. "Fine. You know." But something in him was too tired to perform. He told the truth. He said he lost his job. He said his relationship ended. He said he felt like he was falling apart. Dev listened and nodded slowly. Then Dev asked a question that did not sound like advice, but changed the air. "What if this is not your life breaking? What if this is your life rearranging?" Arin felt irritated. Rearranging sounded too gentle for what he felt. He said, "It feels like destruction." Dev smiled slightly and said, "Destruction is also rearrangement when what falls away was never meant to be your home." Arin did not understand it fully, but the sentence stayed with him. A few days later, Arin ran into Dev again and asked if they could talk. Dev invited him to sit outside on a bench near the building. The day was quiet. Cars passed in the distance. Birds moved in small bursts. Arin told Dev about his fear. Dev did not try to fix it. He asked Arin where the fear lived in the body. Arin looked confused. Fear lived in his mind, not his body. Dev said, "Your mind is not floating in the air. Your mind lives in your nervous system. If you want peace, you have to meet the body." Then Dev taught Arin one simple practice. Sit still for 5 minutes. Feel your feet. Breathe slowly. When thoughts come, do not chase them. Just notice them and return to breath. Arin tried. The first time it felt impossible. His mind screamed. It showed him images of bills. It showed him imagined conversations where friends judged him. It showed him his ex-partner moving on. It showed him himself becoming a failure. Arin wanted to quit after 1 minute. Dev said something that sounded almost too simple. "You are not practicing calm. You are practicing staying. Calm comes later. Staying. That word is powerful. Most people do not suffer only because of events. They suffer because they cannot stay with their own experience. They flee into distraction. They flee into anger. They flee into control. They flee into self-blame. They flee into fantasy. But awakening begins when you stop fleeing. Areen began practicing 5 minutes a day. Not because he loved it, but because it was the only time his mind felt slightly less like a cage. Then something unexpected happened. On day 7, during his 5 minutes, he felt grief rise. Not a thought, a wave. Tears came without a story. His chest tightened and then softened. He cried in a way that felt older than the job loss and older than the breakup. After the tears, he sat quietly and realized something. He had been afraid of losing external things because he had never learned how to hold internal pain. He had been using work and relationships as shields. This is where the idea of Ketu-like energy becomes meaningful, even if you do not follow astrology. Ketu in many traditions is associated with detachment, with stripping away, with dissolving illusion. Whether you call it that or not, life sometimes acts like a force that removes what you thought you needed so you can discover what you actually are. But this discovery is not romantic. It is raw. When Areen had more free time, he had to face his own mind. He could no longer escape into a schedule. He began noticing how harsh his inner voice was. It called him weak. It called him behind. It called him embarrassing. It called him unworthy. He realized something painful. He would never speak to a friend the way he spoke to himself. So he began practicing a new form of discipline. Not discipline of productivity, discipline of compassion. Each time the inner voice attacked, he tried a different response. Not fake positivity, just gentle truth. I am going through a hard season. I am allowed to feel this. I can take the next step without hating myself. At first it felt unnatural. That is normal. Kindness can feel unnatural if you were trained on criticism. In Buddhist practice, there is an idea that the mind is like a field. Whatever you repeatedly plant grows. If you plant contempt, contempt grows. If you plant patience, patience grows. If you plant compassion, compassion grows. This is karma as daily agriculture. Areen began applying this idea, not as a belief system, as a practice. He also began simplifying his life. He canceled subscription. He sold items he did not use. He cooked at home. He cut down on scrolling because scrolling fed comparison. He noticed that comparison was like gasoline on his anxiety. He began spending time alone. At first, solitude felt like punishment. Then something shifted. Solitude began to feel like space. Space to hear himself. Space to grieve without performing. Space to think about what he actually wanted, not what he thought would impress others. This is a strange truth. Sometimes isolation is not abandonment. Sometimes isolation is training. It forces you to stop outsourcing your worth. During this season, Areen applied for jobs, but not with the same frantic energy. He began asking a different question. What kind of work aligns with the person I am becoming? That was new. He asked, what job will keep me safe? Now he asked, what work will keep me honest? He realized he had been in a role that paid well but made him numb. He had tolerated that numbness because the paycheck felt like protection. But numbness accumulates. It becomes depression. It becomes irritability. It becomes the feeling of being absent from your own life. So he started exploring a different path. He took an online course to build a skill he had always been curious about but never prioritized. He reached out to a mentor. He volunteered a few hours a week in a community program just to feel useful without needing applause. At the community program, he met people who had lost far more than he had. People who had immigrated with nothing. People who had survived illness. People who had rebuilt after disasters. They were not all spiritually enlightened. They had pain, but they also had grit. And many of them had a simple inner strength that did not come from status. Areen began learning something that no paycheck had ever taught him. Dignity does not depend on being ahead. Dignity depends on how you meet what is here. One evening after volunteering, Areen walked home and noticed the sunset. Not in a poetic way, in a real way. He realized he had not truly seen the sky in years. He had been too busy, too distracted. The sky had been there the whole time, but his mind had been elsewhere. That moment was tiny, but it was a sign of awakening. When you start noticing simple reality again, it means your mind is returning from trance. Irene began journaling. Not long dramatic entry. Simple, honest line. Today I felt fear and did not run. Today I felt lonely and called a friend without begging. Today I had a job rejection and I treated it as information, not as a verdict. Today I missed my ex and I let the grief move through me. These lines were not just therapy. They were evidence of a changing karma. The old Irene would have reacted with spirals. The new Irene was learning how to stay present. Then a strange thing happened. A friend invited him to a small gathering. Irene almost declined because he felt embarrassed about his life. But he went. At the gathering, someone asked what he had been up to. The old Irene would have performed. The new Irene took a breath and told the truth. He said he had been through a hard season. He said he was rebuilding. He said he was learning a lot about himself. No one laughed. A few people nodded with respect. One person even said, "I went through something similar last year and I never talk about it. Thank you for saying it out loud." This is one of the hidden gifts of loss and isolation. When you stop performing perfection, you make the room safer for others to be human. That is compassion in action. Months passed. Irene got a job offer. It was not the same title as before. It was not as flashy, but it aligned with his values more. The manager seemed kind. The work culture felt healthier. The pay was enough. Not excessive. Enough. Irene accepted it with gratitude. But he noticed something new in himself. He did not treat the job as a savior. He treated it as a tool. He promised himself he would not worship it. That promise is wisdom. When you worship something, you fear losing it. When you fear losing it, you cling. When you cling, you suffer and you often sabotage. When you hold something as a tool, you can appreciate it without being owned by it. Later he dated again. Slowly. Without rushing. Without trying to replace his ex. He learned to ask for what he needed without begging. He learned to leave when patterns were harmful without demonizing anyone. He learned to recognize when his nervous system wanted intensity and choose steadiness instead. That is a profound shift. Many people call intensity chemistry. Sometimes it is trauma echo. Steadiness can feel unfamiliar at first, but unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Unfamiliar can be healing. Now I want to step back and talk about what this story is really pointing to. When people talk about a season of Ketu or detachment or spiritual stripping, they often focus on the loss part. The job loss, the breakup, the isolation, the identity collapse. But the real meaning is the awakening that becomes possible when the illusions fall. The illusion that you are your title. The illusion that you are safe only when others approve. The illusion that control prevents pain. The illusion that distraction is peace. When those illusions fall, you face the rot roof. Life is impermanent. Relationships change. Bodies change. Money changes. Plans change. And yet there is something in you that can remain steady if you train it. That steady part is not a personality trait you are born with. It is practice. Practice is how destiny changes. And compassion is what keeps practice from becoming harsh. Compassion says, "Of course I am scared. I have been through things. My nervous system learned fear for a reason." Wisdom says, "And I do not have to obey fear today." Karma is simply what happens when you repeat that choice many times. Now let me share the resonance part. Because I know some of you listening are in the middle of your own lost season right now. You might feel like you are being erased. You might feel like you are falling behind. You might feel like the world is moving on without you. If that is you, here is what I want you to hear. This season is not proof you are cursed. This season is a classroom. A harsh classroom, yes, but a real one. It is teaching you what is stable inside you and what is borrowed. It is teaching you how you treat yourself when you cannot impress anyone. It is teaching you whether your love was a practice or a dependency. It is teaching you whether your faith is real or only a decoration. And the most important lesson it can teach is this: you can be broken open without being destroyed. Broken open means the ego shell cracks, the identity masks fall, the old strategies stop working, the nervous system protests, the mind panics. But underneath, a quieter truth becomes visible. You are still here. You can still breathe. You can still choose the next wise step. This is why any awakenings start with loss. Not because you deserved loss, but because loss removes distractions. Now I will be honest in a simple way. I have seen people go through seasons like Arin and become kinder. I have also seen people go through the same seasons and become bitter. The difference was not luck. The difference was what they practiced. Bitter practice looks like this: replaying injustice, blaming everyone, refusing to learn, using anger as identity, closing the heart. Awakening practice looks like this: feeling grief without drowning, naming fear without obeying, taking small steps, asking for help without shame, serving others even in small ways, returning to breath, returning to values, returning to compassion. Both paths have pain, but only one path turns pain into wisdom. Thank you for being here with me today. I want you to share your story in the comments. Have you ever gone through a season of loss or isolation that later became a turning point? And what practice helped you move from fear to clarity? If you want more long-form storytelling that turns real-life chaos into lessons about awakening, karma, and destiny, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment so this community can grow. If membership support is available and it fits your situation, it helps keep these deeper conversations alive. Until next time, may your losses become teachers, not chains. May your solitude become a sanctuary, not a prison. And may your practice turn this season into the doorway you did not know you needed.